Gary Gensler, the head honcho of the Securities and Exchange Commission, has a big job. As the leader of the SEC, he's supposed to oversee the entire financial market, ensuring that the rules are followed and that the market operates as intended. He likes to refer to himself as a cop on the beat, the sheriff of Wall Street, if you will. His role is crucial in maintaining investor confidence and the integrity of the financial system. Think of it like a giant poker game with millions of people betting real money. Each player, whether a household investor or a big corporation, has a stake in the game, and the stakes are incredibly high. Gensler's job is to stop cheaters and keep the game honest. He and his team at the SEC scrutinize transactions, investigate suspicious activities, and enforce regulations to prevent fraud and manipulation. But sometimes things get complicated, especially since the SEC isn't the only regulator in town. This only adds to the complexities and the potential for hidden agendas, making Gensler's job that much more challenging. That job includes digging deep into financial records, conducting interviews, and piecing together puzzles to find out the truth. This is where the story of MMTLP comes in, a Wall Street puzzle with a lot of missing pieces. This case has baffled many, with its intricate details and multiple moving parts. And Gary Gensler might hold the key to putting it all together. The MMTLP situation was more than just a puzzle, though. It was also a ticking time bomb. Investors were caught off guard when it began trading in October 2021. Nobody knew what it meant. And in the middle of it all, the SEC was strangely silent. People were looking for answers. They wanted to know if the SEC was paying attention, if they were going to step in and restore order. The clock was ticking and the pressure was mounting on Gary Gensler and the SEC to do something. But when you know where to look, it appears that the SEC has known more than they let on. While the MMTLP drama was playing out, the financial world was in turmoil. Investors were on edge and the markets were experiencing unprecedented volatility. Amidst this chaos, Gary Gensler, the chairman of the SEC, had some interesting meetings on his schedule. He met with folks from FINRA, a self-regulatory organization that oversees brokerage firms and exchanges. FINRA is supposed to play a critical role in maintaining the integrity of the financial markets. But before we look at the meetings in question, let's first look at Gensler's earlier meetings with FINRA and the participants that were present. April 26, 2021, 5 p.m., meeting with Robert Cook, Chief Executive Officer, Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, FINRA. May 4, 2021, 4:30 p.m., meeting with Robert Cook, Chief Executive Officer, Financial Industry. June 28, 2021, 3:30 p.m., meeting with Robert Cook, Chief Executive Officer, Financial Industry. Bear with me, I promise this is going somewhere. July 13th, 2021, 12 p.m., meeting with Robert Cook, Chief Executive Officer, Financial Industry. Gary Gensler became the 33rd chair of the SEC on April 17th, 2021. These meetings with Robert W. Cook began on April 26th, 2021, and according to Gensler's calendars, they met once each month until their meeting on July 13th, 2021. Robert W. Cook has been FINRA's president and CEO since 2016. I think it's safe to assume that these initial meetings were about catching Gensler up to speed. The earliest available calendars are from Chairman Mary L. Shapiro, January 27, 2009 to December 31, 2009. Some interesting facts about Shapiro. Prior to becoming SEC chairman, she was the CEO of FINRA. And after leaving the SEC, she became the chairman of the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, making her not only the first person to hold both of these positions, but also the only person to have also been the CEO of FINRA. The earliest calendars are either consolidated by year or by multiple months. It isn't until Chairman Jay Clayton when most of the calendars are just a single month. As of Saturday, October 5th, 2024, there were 95 calendar downloads representing well over 100 months across multiple SEC chairmen. I searched every calendar for every time the word FINRA appears. What you'll notice if you look at them all is that the majority of the meetings with FINRA and the phone calls with FINRA are limited to the current FINRA CEO or the current CEO and Chief Legal Officer Robert Colby, whom has been FINRA's Chief Legal Officer since July 2009. From what it seems, when there's more people involved, it's more likely a all-hands-on-deck situation. These are some of the examples over the years of meetings with FINRA that include more participants than usual. One interesting piece of information that I saw in a tweet that I can't seem to find is that the SEC chairman's calendar is planned up to 3 months in advance. I couldn't find proof of this anywhere, but AI seems to corroborate this, at least in the way that I asked. This brings us to Gary Gensler's later meetings with FINRA. On January 21, 2022 at 11 a.m., about 6 months since the last time Gensler met with FINRA in the form of Robert W. Cook, he was now meeting with Robert W. Cook and Robert Colby, but also 5 more names from FINRA. Those names were Nathaniel Stankard, Senior Advisor, Stephanie Dumont, Executive Vice President of Market Regulation, Jonathan Sokobin, Senior Vice President and Chief Economist, Raquel Russell, Senior Vice President and Director of Capital Markets Regulatory Practice and Policy, Gregory Dean, Senior Vice President, Office of Government Affairs. But what else is significant about this January 21st, 2022 meeting with FINRA? Well, if you turn back the calendar to 3 months earlier, you end up in October 2021. This was the month that MMTLP became tradable, the same month that then Metamaterials CEO complained to FINRA about the Series A preferred share becoming tradable. We also know that it was sometime before November 29, 2021, that Patricia Cassimates, FINRA's Vice President of Market Operations, was in contact with the SEC concerning MMTLP. We know this because Cassimates was referenced in this email obtained via FOIA request. The fact that Cassimates reached out to the SEC could very well be the reason for the January 21st meeting in 2022, as well as the subsequent meetings that year. And while Cassimates isn't listed as in attendance at any of the meetings between FINRA and the SEC, Stephanie Dumont and Raquel Russell of FINRA were definitely in the FOIA thread. This Sunday, December 11th, 2022 email was sent by FINRA's Executive Vice President and Head of Market Regulation and Transparency Services, Stephanie Dumont, to a redacted SEC contact at 8:33 p.m. FINRA's Senior Vice President and Director of Capital Markets, Raquel Russell, was copied on the email. That email reads as follows: "Hi redacted, hope you're doing well. We wondered if you had a few minutes tomorrow for us to give you an update on what's been happening with MMTLP and the recent trading halt. Would Monday tomorrow at 9 a.m. work?" This is the following meeting between the SEC and FINRA, the very next month on February 17th, 2022 at 12 p.m. While you can see that there are 3 fewer participants according to the calendar, the block of time taken up gives the impression that this meeting potentially lasted twice as long. Also, the names present are all names that were participants in the last meeting. Isn't it strange that all 4 of these names never participated together in a FINRA meeting with the SEC before January 2022? And now here they are having their second meeting together in 2 months. This is an important detail because while it's common to see a SEC and FINRA meeting with Robert W. Cook or Robert W. Cook and Robert Colby, and while it's also common that the SEC would meet with various FINRA employees along with a variety of professionals from other institutions, it's never happened before that a select group of FINRA employees met with the SEC multiple times, unless it was FINRA's Board of Governors. When you factor in the fact that these meetings only began after MMTLP started to trade, and that 3 of the names, Stephanie Dumont, Raquel Russell and Robert W. Cook, were included in the FOIA thread in addition to Robert Colby, whom directly communicated with NextBridge Hydrocarbons in multiple correspondences after the U3 haul, you have to come to terms with this being something more than coincidence. On May 16, 2022, Gary Gensler had a fireside chat at FINRA's annual conference. 2 days later, on May 18, 2022, Gary Gensler met with 3 members of FINRA's Consolidated Audit Trail, CAT, and Andre Owens, partner at WilmerHale, and Michael Simon, independent senior advisor from Deloitte. But 2 days later, yet again, on May 20th, 2022, at 11:15 a.m., Gary Gensler met with most of the same group of FINRA employees that met in January and February of this same year. And similar to the February meeting, it appears that there was a larger than average amount of time allocated to this space on Gensler's calendar. The meeting started at 11:15 and the next event on his calendar was at 1:45. One might assume that maybe that block of time included lunch, but when you compare a day like May 16th, for example, there's no mention of a lunch break, just back-to-back engagements. So next was August 19th, 2022 at 11 a.m. This was now the fourth meeting with FINRA recorded in Gary Gensler's calendars, with basically the same group of individuals that have never before been associated with this type of meeting. We then get to November 28th, 2022 at 2:30 p.m. We all know that FINRA was supposed to handle the next step in the process, so it's interesting that these individuals met yet again with Gary Gensler. This meeting should also stand out because this was just 2 days before George Palikaras met with FINRA and explained to them his exact wishes for the MMTLP corporate action. The fact that his guidance wasn't followed gives the impression that perhaps the SEC already provided guidance. It was on this date that George Palikaras sent this tweet, which publicly showed what he requested of FINRA. Just like the November 18th NextBridge Hydrocarbons prospectus and the November 23rd Metamaterials PR, this tweet makes no mention of December 13th, but somehow FINRA managed to make December 13th the main focus of both MMTLP corporate actions. Finally, we come to December 23rd, 2022 at 12 p.m. This was the first SEC meeting with the core FINRA group after the U3 halt of MMTLP. And it was the first meeting where 4 new participants joined the core group. Steve Randich, FINRA's Chief Information Officer Todd DeGanti, FINRA's Chief Financial Officer Shelley Bolin, Chief Operating Officer of FINRA CAT LLC, and Scott Donaldson, Chief Technology Officer of FINRA CAT LC. Let's now go back to the often overlooked email from the first MMTLP FOIA thread. Dated December 11th, 2022, a Sunday at 8:33 p.m. Stephanie Dumont, FINRA's Executive Vice President, Market Regulation and Transparency Services, sends the following email to a redacted contact, and she copied Raquel Russell, FINRA's Senior Vice President and Director of Capital Markets. Hi redacted, I hope you're doing well. We wondered if you had a few minutes tomorrow for us to give you an update on what's been happening with MMTLP and the recent trading halt. Would Monday/tomorrow at 9 a.m. work? Now, before we analyze this message, let's provide some additional context. Not only was Stephanie Dumont in attendance at the January, February, August, November, and December 2022 Gary Gensler meetings with FINRA, she also met with Adam Large and Sai Rao, Policy Counsel for Gary Gensler, on April 12, 2022. This meeting, which of course doesn't appear on Gensler's calendar, was attended by all 7 of the core FINRA attendees from the Gensler FINRA meetings that began in January 2022, a short time after Patricia Casamaites presumably contacted the SEC regarding MMTLP becoming tradable. Also in attendance was FINRA's Senior Vice President Transparency Services, Ola Persson, whom according to his profile appears to have worked in some of the same areas as Patricia Casamaites. According to the memorandum, the participants discussed the mechanics of reporting securities lending transactions and the differences between repurchase agreements and securities lending transactions. What's the problem with MMTLP? FINRA admits there's short positions that weren't closed due to their U3 halt, but their estimate falls short of the number of shares that NextBridge Hydrocarbons says they've been approached for. In addition to this, TradeStation has admitted to an imbalance related to lending MMTLP that is preventing them from being able to allow their clients to transfer to the transfer agent. FINRA has also acknowledged their inability to effectively track short positions overseas, which is likely the reason why it's practically impossible for international shareholders of NextBridge to transfer to the transfer agent. There's so much more that points to there being a significant imbalance, including the fact that FINRA and the SEC refused to provide a share count, or at the very least the findings from the Blue Sheet investigation that FINRA initiated on December 5, 2022. But getting back to the topic of the April 12, 2022 meeting between FINRA and Gary Gensler's Policy Counsel, the problems related to MMTLP clearly fit the subject matter of their meeting. The fact that this core group of high-ranking FINRA executives were in attendance at multiple meetings only after MMTLP became tradable and Metamaterials complained, not to mention that Robert W. Cook, Stephanie Dumont, and Raquel Russell would later appear in the MMTLP FOIA thread, and that Robert Colby would correspond with NextBridge Hydrocarbons in multiple messages. It's practically a no-brainer that these meetings were about MMTLP, but there's more evidence towards the end of the video. Now, with all of this in mind, let's read the Stephanie Dumont email from the FOIA thread once again. Hi, Redacted. I hope you're doing well. We wondered if you had a few minutes tomorrow for us to give you an update on what's been happening with MMTLP and the recent trading halt. Would Monday/tomorrow at 9 a.m. work? Whomever Dumont was speaking to, it's clear that this email wasn't the first time they spoke together about MMTLP. Dumont said she wanted to update this contact on what's been happening with MMTLP and the recent trading halt. Dumont is head of the department at FINRA that allegedly conducts extensive oversight of the securities market via innovative, automated surveillance that assesses billions of market events each day. I'd imagine that the Executive Vice President of Market Regulation and Transparency Services would be able to access her work from home. So it reads like she was monitoring the situation on Sunday, when she mentioned what's been happening with MMTLP in this December 11th email, given that MMTLP was U3 halted before the December 9th trading day began. She clearly differentiated between what's been happening with MMTLP and the recent trading halt. This Sunday evening email also shows that they clearly plan to discuss MMTLP on Monday, December 12th, so they obviously had more than enough time to contemplate the repercussions associated with following through with deleting the trading symbol on December 13th. But there were also two other emails from FINRA to the SEC on December 2nd and December 5th that clearly showed that the SEC was aware of a problem with MMTLP and possibly MMAT before the U3 halt. And when you read those emails, notice that the writer on FINRA's end always composed the message in a way that clearly indicated that the recipient was already aware of MMTLP and/or MMAT. Also notice that these messages are to the SEC from FINRA employees that at the very least were not attending the multiple meetings with the core group of FINRA higher-ups throughout 2022. The December 2nd email references the SEC being in contact with FINRA's OTC corporate actions team. My theory here is that in the November 28th meeting, it was decided that the SEC would provide further instruction directly to that team. Stay with me? If you were on FINRA's OTC corporate actions team and you were instructed to either participate in fraud or look the other way while fraud took place, what department would you contact? The fraud department. This explains why Richard Boyle, Assistant Director of FINRA's fraud department out of Washington, D.C., is circling back to the SEC and copying Jay Gibbon, a principal investigator out of FINRA's Rockville, Maryland office, obviously to gain understanding about what they were just told by FINRA's corporate action team. This explains why Sam Draddy, FINRA's Senior Vice President National Cause and Financial Crimes Detection Program, reawakens the inquiry email thread from November 29, 2021. This is how long he has seemingly been out of the loop. Why else would he revisit this email chain copying both Richard Boyle and Jay Gibbon, whom were not copied on the November 2021 email? Further evidence of Draddy being out of the loop is that on December 5th, 2022, a day before FINRA would post the first fraudulent MMTLP corporate action, Draddy is both informing the SEC that he's initiating a blue sheet investigation and hoping to get caught up on what has already taken place in the SEC's investigation. Try to go back to December 2022. Rosa Tawil took FINRA to court almost immediately. Robert W. Cook told FINRA employees to stay home due to alleged threats. FINRA was bombarded with phone calls, and they also abandoned their activity on Twitter for several weeks. All over social media, investors were calling out FINRA's use of the U3 halt to protect short sellers and questioning the SEC as to when they planned to step in. What was the SEC doing at this time? According to Gary Gensler's December 2022 calendar, on December 22nd, he met with a large group of professionals that all appear to have a connection to FINRA's Consolidated Audit Trail, FINRA-CAT. I highlight a few. Sonia Srivastav, Director of Regulatory Initiatives Legal at the New York Stock Exchange for more than a decade. She was responsible for driving decisions, deliverables, and project planning to meet CAT-related milestones. Cindy Retterer, Vice President of NASDAQ with more than 2 decades of experience. Retterer was the lead person that oversaw the CAT project, the various work streams, and she was responsible for identifying and resolving issues. Len Gatrell, Senior Director, Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, FINRA. He's responsible for providing direction and oversight on FINRA's consolidated audit trail. This one is interesting because I didn't find how this person is linked to FINRA CAT. Larry O'Leary, Vice President of MIAX, had a nearly 22-year career in market surveillance at FINRA. What's interesting, though, is the members' directory of MIAX Apex Clearing Corporation. They've had issues related to MMTLP, BNP Paribas Securities Corp., an entity that's been fined multiple billions of dollars for doing business with sanctioned countries, Bank of America. There's a reason Warren Buffett has recently fire-sold a large portion of his B of A shares, Citadel Securities LLC, Goldman Sachs and CO LLC, GTS Securities linked to the earliest trades in MMTLP. Their business model is dependent on securities sold but not yet purchased. They were fined $10 million just last year by the NYSE and NYSE ARCA for up to 6 years of manipulation, and they should have been investigated by FINRA for the same manipulation, but that they've been shielded for some odd reason. HRT Financial, Interactive Brokers, Jane Street, Susquehanna Investment Group, Wells Fargo, Wolverine Execution Services, Dell LLC, and more. Something else that stands out is how this meeting appeared to go longer than planned, if it was planned. There's definitely more to be discovered about the names in attendance here, but let's move on. Before discussing the events surrounding December 23rd, I have to point out another off-calendar meeting between FINRA employees and CIRAO that you won't find on Gary Gensler's calendar. I'm bringing it up now because from the listed subject matter, it clearly relates to FINRA CAT. The participants discussed the CAT Data Security Amendment and FINRA's current use of CAT data. In attendance was Stephanie Dumont and Raquel Russell that represented that core FINRA group that would eventually meet with the SEC 8 times in 2022, 7 meetings in which Dumont was present, and 4 times for Russell. But also in attendance was Len Gatrell, Senior Director, FINRA SRO CAT Regulatory, whom was also at the December 22nd meeting that we just discussed. Alex Ellenberg, FINRA's VP of Regulatory Risk Control, and John Croper, FINRA's Executive VP, Quality of Markets, both of whom once worked for the SEC. Croper would go on to retire at the end of 2023. Steve Randich, FINRA's Executive VP and Chief Information Officer, he mentioned in an interview that FINRA spends $200 million a year on Amazon AWS cloud service. You'd imagine that at that cost, nothing should be beyond detection. And then there's Eric Pickersgill, FINRA's Senior VP of Cybersecurity and Information Security. He really likes the cloud. The timing and subject matter of this July 22nd, 2022 meeting might be significant because the first MMTLP NextBridge Hydrocarbons S1 was just 1 week earlier on July 15th, 2022. If you recall that S1 finally became effective after 4 months of lengthy reviews and minor adjustments on November 18th, 2022. Just 10 days later, that core group of FINRA executives minus Raquel Russell and Nathaniel Stankard met with Gary Gensler on November 28, 2022. You really have to ask yourself how many of these SEC meetings with FINRA closely aligning with major events related to Torchlight, Metamaterials, and MMTLP can be written off as mere coincidence. The MMTLP community's very own Curtis pointed out that Gary Gensler met with the Options Clearing Corporation on June 28, 2021 at 3 p.m. Directly after this, Gary Gensler met with Robert W. Cook in the old meeting with FINRA format that only showed Cook's name on the calendar. Why this is significant is because the reverse merger between Torchlight and Metamaterials became effective on June 28, 2021. Coincidence? How's this for a coincidence? When outlets like Yahoo Finance reported on June 21, 2021, that Torchlight and Metamaterial agreed to extend the outside date by which they were to close their business combination to June 30, 2021. According to the article, the extension was intended to provide time for the June 24, 2021 record date and the June 25th payment date of the special Series A preferred stock dividend. Then, when you look at the First Options Clearing Corporation memo, which wasn't widely distributed to the public nor to the issuer, you'll notice that the June 21st, 2021 date of the memo matches the date of the June 21st Yahoo Finance article, but the effective date of June 23rd, 2021 on the memo appears to have been a guess. Then, when you observe the official June 25th, 2021 seconds filing from Torchlight, the effective date in this document was June 28th, 2021. This, of course, was matched in the Second Options Clearing Corporation memo, dated June 25th, 2021. In addition to John Berder stating that they weren't aware of these memos since they weren't originally distributed to the public, the circumstances relating to the timing, creation, and revisions to the OCC memos bear a striking resemblance to what eventually occurred with the MMTLP corporate actions. Also, at first glance, it might appear a bit far-fetched that the newly appointed SEC chairman would bother to be involved with alleged shady activity with his newfound contemporaries. But the truth is that Gensler has been an acquaintance of Craig Donoghue, the Options Clearing Corporation's executive since as early as 2010, when Donoghue was the chief executive officer of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, and Gensler was the chairman of the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. In fact, it was in 2009, when Gensler was chairman of the CFTC, that he displayed a disdain for the speculative trading of energy futures contracts, which he seemed to believe contributed to volatile price swings in the market. Gensler's views from as far back as 15 years ago show that he once believed speculators could magnify price swings, causing concern that speculative trading in oil and gas futures could lead to excessive price volatility. Now, in 2024, the SEC has recently adopted climate risk disclosure rules for public companies. These rules would obviously have a significant impact on public oil and gas companies, which in many ways appears to show that Gensler has a long history of not showing favor to the industry. If this isn't just a fluke, then it wouldn't be difficult to imagine that he'd look the other way, or even lend a hand in what has been happening to Torchlight, Metamaterials, and MMTLP under his leadership. On December 23, 2022, Gary Gensler met with FINRA for the first time since the U3 halt of MMTLP. 4 out of 7 of the FINRA core meeting attendees were present: Robert W. Cook, Robert Colby, Nathaniel Stankard, and Stephanie Dumont. In addition to these 4 core attendees, Steve Randich, FINRA's Chief Information Officer, Todd DeGancy, FINRA's Chief Financial Officer, Shelley Bolin, Chief Operating Officer, FINRA CAT LLC, and Scott Donaldson, Chief Technology Officer, FINRA CAT LLC, were also present. Not only does this meeting clearly appear to be about MMTLP, but all of the attendees from FINRA and FINRA CAT LLC were the heads of their respective departments. Is it just a coincidence that this same group has met with Gary Gensler and/or members of his staff nearly every month in 2022, beginning just a short time after MMTLP became tradable? Keep in mind that this meeting took place just 2 weeks after the U3 halt of MMTLP, a time where MMTLP was trending on social media. FINRA was fighting a lawsuit related to the halt, and they abandoned posting on their Twitter account. But that isn't all. Thanks to another granted FOIA request, we've been given access to another email thread. In these correspondences between Gary Gensler's staff related to the meetings on his calendar, we can see that when Gensler's December 23rd, 2022 meeting with FINRA is referenced, the subject of the meeting is redacted. Not only that, but the size of the redacted subject appears to be just one word, or better yet, a trading symbol. 9 months after that December 23rd, 2022 meeting, Gary Gensler was questioned by Rep. Ralph Norman at a September 23, 2023 hearing. Gensler appeared to be caught off guard when Norman questioned him about MMTLP. He truly appeared to be afraid of what Norman might ask him next. Gensler didn't deny being aware of MMTLP, but his responses really made it appear as though he had something to hide. Gensler avoided simple questions, purposely offering responses that weren't helpful. You really need to take the time to watch this very short video if you haven't seen it before. There's so much to analyze here that unfortunately we'll have to wait for another video, so. In particular, there's everyone's employment histories. So many of these people worked at the same handful of organizations and have been in the same circles for multiple decades, building relationships, doing favors, and getting promotions in return for their loyalty. This has been going on for quite some time, so it'll definitely be worthwhile to address the former SEC Regional Director Mark Fagel's involvement with the Overstock case, Marshall Gandy's potential reason for leaving, then returning to the SEC Fort Worth office, and the shortcomings of SEC chairman before Gensler. Not to mention the significance of Michael P. Waugh, once serving as acting chair, only to then become a senior advisor for Ari Rubenstein's GTS Securities. Stay tuned. There's also more obvious correlation to events on Gensler's calendars, and the new FOIA proves that Gensler's calendar does allow for flexibility at times, which means that it's very possible that some of these meetings didn't need to be scheduled months in advance.